Maya sat on her bed, staring at the faded flowers on her childhood wallpaper. Her hands rested on her round belly where her baby moved restlessly as if sensing her fear. The thin walls of their small house did nothing to block out her father's angry voice from the kitchen below. Each word felt like a dagger to her heart. "She has brought nothing but shame to our family," her father's voice boomed. 8 months pregnant, no husband, and look at the size of her. What will people think? What will they say about us? Maya closed her eyes and tried to remember happier times. She thought about when she was little, how her father used to carry her on his shoulders at the local fair, how he would buy her cotton candy and tell her she was his princess. Those days felt like a distant dream now. Everything changed when her mother got sick 3 years ago. The medical bills piled up, and her father became bitter and angry at the world. The baby's father, David, had seemed so kind and loving at first. He promised they would get married and raise their child together. But when Maya told him about the pregnancy, his face changed. He made excuses, said he wasn't ready, and eventually stopped answering her calls completely. Maya later found out he had moved to another state without telling anyone. She was left alone, scared, and growing bigger every day. Her weight had always been a struggle. Even as a child, Maya was rounder than other kids. Her mother used to defend her, telling people that Maya was healthy and beautiful just as she was. But after her mother passed away last year, there was no one left to shield Maya from her father's harsh words about her appearance. He would make comments about her eating habits and compare her to thinner girls in their neighborhood. "Maybe if you weren't so heavy, David wouldn't have run away," he had said just last week. Those words still echoed in Maya's mind, making her question everything about herself. From downstairs, she could hear her father talking to someone on the phone. His voice was different now, more businesslike and cold. Maya pressed her ear to the floor, trying to make out the conversation. She caught fragments of words that made her stomach twist with worry. "Yes, she's healthy. Due soon. Not asking for much money. Just want her taken care of. Maya's blood ran cold. Was her father talking about her? Was he actually trying to find someone to take her away? She had heard stories of families who couldn't cope with unmarried pregnant daughters, but she never imagined her own father would go that far. She remembered the conversation they had just 2 days ago. Maya had been sitting at the kitchen table, slowly eating a bowl of soup her aunt had brought over. Her father was pacing back and forth, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "The neighbors are talking," he had said. "Mrs. Rodriguez asked me when the wedding was going to be. I had to tell her there isn't going to be one. Do you know how that made me feel? Do you know what people are saying about our family?" Maya had tried to apologize, tried to explain that she never meant for things to turn out this way. But her father wasn't interested in hearing her side of the story. In his mind, she had made her choice, and now the whole family had to live with the consequences. "I've worked hard my whole life to build a good reputation in this community," he continued. "Your mother and I raised you to have good values, to make smart choices, and this is how you repay us." The conversation downstairs was getting more detailed now. Maya could hear her father mentioning her due date, talking about her ability to work and help around the house. It sounded like he was describing her to someone like she was a piece of furniture he was trying to sell. Maya thought about her few friends, who had slowly disappeared from her life over the past months. Some of them were uncomfortable with her situation, while others were forbidden by their parents from associating with her. Only her Aunt Lisa still came by occasionally, bringing food and offering quiet support. But even Aunt Lisa seemed overwhelmed by the situation and didn't know how to help. The worst part was feeling completely powerless. Maya had no money of her own, no job skills, and nowhere else to go. She had finished high school but never went to college because the family couldn't afford it. She had been working part-time at a local grocery store, but had to quit when her pregnancy made it difficult to stand for long hours. Her father had made it clear that once the baby was born, she couldn't stay in his house anymore. "I'm not going to support you and a child," he had said. "You made adult choices, now you need to find adult solutions." Maya had spent many sleepless nights trying to figure out what those solutions might be. She looked into government assistance programs, but the waiting lists were long and the benefits were barely enough to survive on. She considered reaching out to David's family, but they had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her. Or the baby. The phone conversation downstairs was wrapping up now. She heard her father say something about someone coming by tomorrow to meet her and see if it would work out. Maya's heart started racing. Who was coming to meet her? What kind of arrangement was her father making? She stood up slowly, her back aching from the weight of the baby, and walked to her bedroom window. Outside, she could see the small town where she had lived her entire life. The same streets where she learned to ride a bike, the same park where she played as a child, the same church where her family went every Sunday. It all looked the same, but everything felt different now. Maya placed both hands on her belly and whispered to her unborn child, "I don't know what's going to happen to us, baby, but I promise I'll do everything I can to keep you safe." She felt a strong kick in response, as if the baby was trying to reassure her that they would face whatever came next together. The sun began to set. Maya heard her father's heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. She quickly got back into bed and pretended to be asleep, but her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it through the door. He paused outside her room for a moment, then continued to his own bedroom down the hall. Maya lay awake, most of that night staring at the ceiling and wondering what tomorrow would bring. She had no idea that her father's phone call would change her life forever, or that sometimes the things that seem like the worst possible outcomes can actually lead to unexpected blessings. All she knew was that she was scared, alone, and running out of options fast. The baby moved again, reminding Maya that whatever happened next, she wasn't completely alone. She had someone depending on her now, someone who would need her to be strong no matter what challenges lay ahead. With that thought, she finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that tomorrow would mark the beginning of a journey she never could have imagined. Maya woke up to the sound of a truck engine rumbling outside her window. Her heart sank as she remembered the phone conversation from the night before. She had barely slept, hoping that maybe she had misunderstood what her father was planning. But the unfamiliar sound of the diesel engine told her that her worst fears were about to come true. She pulled herself out of bed slowly, her pregnant body making every movement feel heavy and awkward. Through the thin curtains she could see a beat-up blue pickup truck parked in their driveway. The truck was old but well-maintained, with scratches and dents that spoke of years of hard work. In the back, she could see tools and equipment covered by a weathered tarp. Maya's hands trembled as she got dressed in one of the few outfits that still fit her expanding body. She chose a simple blue dress that her aunt had bought for her, hoping it would make a good impression on whoever was downstairs. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this person? What did they want with her? And most importantly, what would happen to her baby? The sound of heavy boots on the front porch made her freeze. She heard the doorbell ring, followed by her father's footsteps hurrying to answer it. Maya crept to the top of the stairs, trying to hear the conversation without being seen. "You must be Robert," her father said, his voice unnaturally cheerful. Come in. Thank you for driving all this way." "No problem," came a deep, gravelly voice. "The roads weren't too bad, though I should mention there's snow in the forecast for later this week." Maya's father led the stranger into the living room, their voices becoming clearer as they settled in. She could hear the creak of their old couch as someone sat down. "Can I offer you some coffee?" her father asked, playing the role of a gracious host. Maya had rarely seen him act so polite with strangers. "That would be nice, thank you." As her father busied himself in the kitchen, Maya took the opportunity to sneak down a few steps to get a better look at this mysterious visitor. What she saw surprised her. The man wasn't what she had expected at all. He was tall and broad-shouldered, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and a full beard. His clothes were simple but clean, worn jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. Most surprisingly, his eyes were kind rather than threatening. When her father returned with the coffee, the two men began talking in serious tones, Maya straining to hear every word. "So you understand the situation," her father began. "The girl is, well, she's made some poor choices." She's going to need someone who can provide structure and guidance. I understand she's expecting, the stranger replied quietly. That's not a poor choice, that's just life. Things happen. Maya was surprised by the gentleness in his voice. Her father seemed taken aback too, clearing his throat before continuing. Yes. Well, the point is, she needs somewhere to go. Someone to take responsibility for her. I'm prepared to offer you $2,000 to take her off my hands. She's a hard worker when she applies herself, and once the baby comes, she be even more motivated to contribute. Maya's heart stopped. $2,000. Her father was literally selling her like property. She gripped the stair railing so tightly her knuckles turned white, fighting back the urge to run back to her room and hide under the covers. I don't want your money, the stranger said firmly. If I'm going to help your daughter, it's because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm being paid to do it. There was a long silence. Maya could picture her father's confusion. He had probably expected this man to be eager for the money. I don't understand, her father finally said. Why would you want to take on this burden without compensation? Maybe. Because I don't see a pregnant young woman as a burden, the man replied, his voice carrying a hint of disapproval. Maybe because I think everyone deserves a chance to build a decent life for themselves and their children. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. This stranger was defending her more than her own father ever had. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with her father trying to explain all the reasons why Maya was a difficult case and the stranger asking practical questions about her health, her due date, and what kind of help she might need. Finally, her father called up the stairs. Maya, come down here. There's someone I want you to meet. Her legs felt like jelly as she made her way down the stairs. The stranger stood up when she entered the room, which surprised her. Most people had stopped showing her that kind of respect. Months ago, hello, he said simply, extending his hand. I'm Robert. Maya shook his hand tentatively. His grip was firm but gentle, and his calloused hands spoke of years of hard work. Hi, she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. Robert studied her face with concern. How are you feeling? You look tired. It was such a simple question, but Maya couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked about her well-being. She felt fresh tears threatening to spill over. I'm okay, she lied. Her father jumped in quickly. She's been having trouble sleeping. Pregnancy hormones, you know? She'd be much better once she has some stability in her life. Robert ignored her father and kept his attention focused on Maya. When is your baby due? 3 weeks, Maya said, unconsciously placing her hand on her belly. Are you getting proper medical care? Regular checkups? Maya nodded, though the truth was she had missed her last 2 appointments because her father claimed they couldn't afford the gas money to drive to the clinic. Good, Robert said. That's important. Her father was getting impatient with all the questions about Maya's well-being. So, do we have a deal? He asked bluntly. Robert looked back and forth between Maya and her father, and she could see something change in his expression. His jaw tightened slightly, and his eyes grew cold when he looked at her father. I need to speak with Maya alone for a minute, Robert said. Her father started to protest, but Robert held up his hand. If I'm going to be responsible for her well-being, I need to know that this is what she wants. Not what you want for her, but what she wants for herself. Reluctantly, her father left the room, though Maya knew he would probably try to listen. From the kitchen, Robert sat back down and gestured for Maya to take the chair across from him. When she was seated, he leaned forward slightly. Maya, I want you to know that you have a choice here. If you don't want to come with me, just say, So, I'll leave right now and your father can figure out another solution. Maya stared at him in shock. No one had offered her a choice in months. But if you do decide to come, Robert continued, I want you to understand what you're agreeing to. I live alone in a cabin about 3 hours from here. It's remote, but it's peaceful. I make furniture for a living and I could use help with the business side of things if you're interested. You'd have your own room, your own space. And when the baby comes, we'll make sure you both have everything you need. Maya tried to process what he was telling her. It sounded too good to be true. Why would you do this for a stranger? she asked. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Because everyone deserves a chance to start over. And because I know what it's like to feel like you have nowhere else to turn. 20 minutes later, Maya's few belongings were loaded into the back of Robert's truck. Her father shook Robert's hand one final time, counting the money Robert had insisted on giving him despite his earlier refusal. Maya realized her father had worn him down during their private conversation. As they drove away from the only home Maya had ever known. She looked back to see her father already walking back into the house. He didn't wave goodbye. Robert noticed her watching in the side mirror. "You okay?" he asked gently. Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was okay or if she ever would be again. All she knew was that she was heading into the unknown with a stranger who had shown her more kindness in 1 hour than her own family had shown her in months. As the familiar streets of her town disappeared behind them, Maya placed her hand on her belly and whispered a quiet prayer that she was making the right choice for both of them. The 3-hour drive felt like the longest journey of Maya's life. As they left the familiar streets of her small town behind, the landscape gradually changed from suburban neighborhoods to rolling hills, and finally to dense forests that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Maya pressed her face to the passenger window, watching the world transform outside. Robert had tried to make conversation during the first hour, asking gentle questions about her interests and telling her a bit about his work. But Maya was too overwhelmed to respond with more than short answers. Her mind was spinning with questions and fears about what lay ahead. Eventually, they settled into a comfortable silence, with only the hum of the truck engine and the occasional song from Robert's old radio to break the quiet as they climbed higher into the mountains. Maya noticed how the air seemed cleaner and fresher, even inside the truck. The trees grew taller and thicker, creating a canopy overhead that filtered the afternoon sunlight into dancing patterns on the road. She had never been this far from home before, and despite her fear, she couldn't help but feel amazed by the natural beauty surrounding them. "We're almost there," Robert said softly, glancing over at her. "Just about 10 more minutes." Maya's stomach tightened with nerves. She had been imagining all kinds of scenarios during the drive. What if his cabin was falling apart? What if there was no electricity or running water? What if he had lied about everything and had terrible plans for her once they were isolated from civilization? They turned off the main road onto a narrow dirt path that wound through the trees. The truck bounced and jostled over rocks and ruts, making Maya grip the door handle tightly. Her baby seemed to protest the rough ride, kicking and squirming more than usual. "Sorry about the bumpy road," Robert said, noticing her discomfort. "I keep meaning to get it graded, but it's not easy to get equipment up here." Finally, they emerged into a small clearing, and Maya got her first look at what would be her new home. The cabin was much larger and more welcoming than she had expected. Built from dark wood logs with a green metal roof, it looked sturdy and well-maintained. A wide covered porch wrapped around the front, complete with 2 rocking chairs and several hanging plants. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, suggesting a warm fire waited inside. "This is it," Robert said, parking the truck near the front steps. "Home sweet home." Maya climbed out of the truck slowly, her pregnant body stiff from the long ride. The first thing that struck her was the incredible silence. After living her whole life in town, where there was always the sound of traffic, neighbors, or machinery in the background, the mountain quiet felt almost magical. She could hear birds singing, leaves rustling in the breeze, and somewhere in the distance, the gentle sound of running water. "Is that a stream?" she asked, forgetting her nervousness for a moment. Robert smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all day. "Yeah, Willow Creek runs right behind the cabin. The water's clean enough to drink, though I have a well too. Would you like to see inside?" Maya nodded, following him up the wooden steps to the front door. The porch boards were solid under her feet, and she noticed several pairs of work boots lined up neatly beside the door. Robert wiped his feet on a worn mat and gestured for her to do the same. The inside of the cabin surprised her even more than the outside had. She had expected something dark and cramped, but instead found herself in a spacious, bright living room with tall ceilings and large windows that let in plenty of natural light. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a fire crackling cheerfully in the hearth. The furniture was simple but beautiful, clearly handmade from the same dark wood as the cabin's exterior. "You made all this?" Maya asked, running her hand along the smooth surface of a coffee table. "Most of it," Robert said with quiet pride. "It's what I do for a living. Custom furniture, cabinets, that sort of thing. People from the city drive up here to buy pieces for their homes." Maya looked around with new appreciation. Every piece of furniture was perfectly crafted, from the comfortable-looking couch to the tall bookshelves that lined another wall. The whole room felt warm and inviting, like something from a magazine about country living. "Come on, let me show you your room," Robert said, leading her down a hallway. Maya's heart started beating faster again. This was the moment she had been dreading most. What kind of sleeping arrangements had he prepared for her? Her father's warning words echoed in her mind, about being careful around men who lived alone. Robert stopped at a door about halfway down the hall and pushed it open. "This is yours," he said simply. Stepping aside so she could look in, Maya stepped into the doorway and gasped. The room was beautiful. A large window looked out into the forest, where she could see squirrels chasing each other through the trees. A comfortable-looking bed with a handmade wooden frame sat against one wall, covered with a colorful quilt. There was a dresser, a small desk, and even a rocking chair positioned near the window. "The door has a lock," Robert said quietly, pointing to a solid deadbolt on the inside of the door. "You can lock it whenever you want privacy, day or night." Maya stared at the lock, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. He was giving her control over her own space, her own safety. It was more respect than her own father had shown her in months. "There's a bathroom right across the hall," Robert continued. "You don't have to share it with anyone. I have my own at the other end of the house. This is all for me?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "All yours," Robert confirmed. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll go get your things from the truck." As Robert's footsteps faded down the hallway, Maya sat carefully on the edge of the bed, testing its firmness. It was perfect, not too soft, not too hard. She looked around the room again, taking in all the thoughtful details. Fresh flowers in a vase on the dresser, a small basket on the desk containing notebooks and pens, even a few books on the nightstand, including one about pregnancy and childbirth. Maya picked up the pregnancy book and flipped through it, realizing that Robert must have bought it specifically for her. When was the last time anyone had gone out of their way to get her something helpful? She couldn't remember. Robert returned with her suitcase and the few boxes that contained her belongings. "I'll just set these here," he said, placing them gently on the floor. "Take your time getting settled. Dinner won't be ready for a couple hours." "You cook?" Maya asked, surprised. Robert chuckled. "Well, I've been living alone for 5 years, so I had to learn or starve. I'm not fancy, but I can manage the basics. Tonight I was planning on making beef stew and cornbread. Is that okay with you?" Maya's stomach rumbled at the mention of food, reminding her that she had barely eaten anything all day due to nerves. "That sounds wonderful." "Good. If you need anything at all, just holler. I'll be in the workshop out back for a while, finishing up a project." After Robert left, Maya spent the next hour exploring her new room more thoroughly. She opened the dresser drawers and found them lined with fresh paper and smelling faintly of cedar. The desk had supplies in it, and the closet was spacious enough for her few clothes with room to spare, but it was when she tested the door lock that she finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was going to be safe here. The deadbolt slid smoothly into place with a satisfying click. She unlocked it and locked it again several times, marveling at the feeling of control it gave her. As the afternoon light began to fade, Maya unpacked her things slowly, placing her clothes in the dresser and arranging her few personal items around the room. For the first time in months, she felt like she might have found a place where she could breathe again. The smell of dinner cooking began to drift down the hallway, and Maya's stomach responded with enthusiasm. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until now. More importantly, she hadn't realized how much she had missed. Feeling safe and welcome somewhere, looking out her window at the darkening forest, Maya placed her hand on her belly and spoke quietly to her unborn child. I think we might be okay here, little one. I think we might actually be okay. Maya woke up on her third morning at the cabin to the sound of rain pattering gently against her window. For a moment, she forgot where she was, expecting to see the familiar walls of her childhood bedroom. Instead, she found herself looking out at the misty forest, where droplets of water clung to pine needles like tiny diamonds. The past 2 days had been a careful dance of politeness between her and Robert. They shared meals together, but conversation was limited to basic pleasantries about the weather or simple questions about her comfort. Maya spent most of her time in her room, reading the pregnancy book Robert had left for her or simply staring out the window at the peaceful woods. Robert, for his part, seemed to understand that she needed space to adjust. He went about his daily routine of working in his shop, tending to his small garden, and maintaining the cabin, always making sure Maya knew where he was and when he would be back. He never made her feel trapped or watched, but she always felt safe knowing he was nearby. This morning felt different somehow. Maybe it was the gentle rain creating a cozy atmosphere, or maybe Maya was finally starting to relax. But when she made her way to the kitchen for breakfast, she found herself actually looking forward to seeing Robert. He was standing at the stove, cooking what smelled like pancakes and bacon. His graying hair was slightly damp, suggesting he had already been outside checking on things despite the rain. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "I hope the rain didn't keep you awake. Sometimes it gets pretty loud on the metal roof." "Actually, I slept better than I have in weeks," Maya admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "The sound was kind?" Of soothing, Robert's smile grew wider. "I'm glad to hear that. My wife used to say the same thing about rainy nights here." It was the first time Robert had mentioned having a wife, and Maya felt a flutter of curiosity. She had wondered about his personal history but hadn't felt comfortable asking. She settled into one of the handmade chairs at the kitchen table, noting how perfectly it supported her back despite her growing belly. "Was?" Maya asked gently, picking up on his use of the past tense. Robert's hands paused in their work for just a moment before he continued flipping pancakes. "She passed away 5 years ago," he said quietly. "Car accident on a snowy road down the mountain." "I'm so sorry," Maya said, meaning it deeply. She understood loss, having recently lost her mother. "Thank you," Robert replied, bringing a plate of perfectly golden pancakes to the table. "She would have loved having you here. Clara always said this place was too quiet without the sound of a family." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. She hadn't felt like part of a family in so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be wanted somewhere. As they ate breakfast together, Robert began sharing more stories about his life on the mountain. He told her about the wildlife that visited their clearing, the seasonal changes that painted the forest in different colors throughout the year, and the satisfaction he found in creating beautiful furniture with his own hands. "I have to drive down to town this afternoon," Robert mentioned as they finished eating. "I need to deliver a dining set to a customer and pick up some supplies. Would you like to come along? You could see the doctor while we're there." Maya realized she had completely forgotten about her prenatal appointments in the stress of everything that had happened. "I don't have any money for a doctor visit," she said, feeling embarrassed. "Don't worry about that," Robert said casually. "Consider it part of making sure you and the baby stay healthy. It's important." The drive down the mountain was completely different from her arrival 3 days earlier. This time, Maya felt comfortable enough to ask questions about the area, and Robert was happy to play tour guide. He pointed out landmarks, told her about the local history, and even shared some amusing stories about his various customers in town. At the medical clinic, Robert waited patiently in the lobby while Maya had her checkup. Dr. Martinez, a kind woman in her 50s, seemed surprised to see Maya with someone new but asked no invasive questions about her circumstances. "Everything looks good," the doctor announced after examining Maya. The baby's heartbeat is strong, and you're measuring right on track for your due date. Have you been getting enough rest and proper nutrition? Maya glanced toward the door, thinking about Robert waiting outside. Yes, actually. Better than I have in months. That's wonderful to hear, Dr. Martinez said, making notes in Maya's chart. I want to see you again in 2 weeks, and then weekly after that until the baby arrives. Do you have reliable transportation? Yes, Maya said, surprised by her own confidence. She somehow knew that Robert would make sure she got to every appointment. When they left the clinic, Robert suggested they stop at the local grocery store. I thought you might like to pick out some things you enjoy eating, he said. I'm a pretty basic cook, but I'm willing to learn if there are specific foods you're craving. Walking through the grocery store with Robert felt surreal. He pushed the cart while she selected items, asking her opinion on everything from fresh fruit to different types of bread. When she hesitated over some expensive prenatal vitamins, Robert quietly added them to the cart without comment. What about ice cream? He asked when they passed the frozen food section. Clara always said pregnant. Women needed plenty of ice cream. Maya found herself laughing for the first time in months. I do love ice cream, she admitted. What's your favorite flavor? Strawberry, she said shyly. Robert grabbed a large container of strawberry ice cream and added it to their cart. Essential groceries, he said with a wink on the drive back up. The mountain, Maya found herself opening up more than she had since arriving. She told Robert about her love of reading, her dreams of maybe going to college someday, and even a little bit about her relationship with her mother before she passed away. Your mother sounds like she was a wonderful woman, Robert said. I bet she would be proud of how strong you're being right now. That evening, as they shared a dinner of the comfort food Maya had selected at the store, she began to see Robert in a completely different light. He wasn't just a stranger who had taken her in out of duty or obligation. He was a genuinely kind man who seemed to understand what she needed without her having to ask for it. When a sudden thunderstorm rolled through later that night, Maya felt her first real contractions. They weren't severe, but they were definitely more intense than the practice contractions she had been experiencing for weeks. She made her way to the living room where Robert was reading by the fire. I think something might be happening, she said, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. Robert immediately set down his book and gave her his full attention. What are you feeling? Maya described the sensations, and Robert listened carefully before suggesting they time the contractions to see if they were developing a pattern. For the next 2 hours, he sat with her, keeping track of the timing and intensity, offering comfort and reassurance. I think these might be false labor pains, he said eventually, after the contractions began to space out and weaken. But if they get stronger or more regular, we'll head straight to the hospital. Have you done this before? Maya asked, impressed. By his calm knowledge, Robert smiled. I've helped deliver quite a few calves and foals over the years. The principles are similar, though I definitely prefer having a doctor around for human babies. As the storm passed and Maya's contractions subsided, she realized something important had shifted between them. Robert had seen her at her most vulnerable, and had responded with nothing but kindness and competence. For the first time since arriving, Maya felt like she truly wasn't alone. Thank you, she said as they prepared to head to their respective bedrooms. For everything. I know my father probably made it sound like you were doing him a favor, but you're really saving my life. Robert paused at the bottom of the stairs, his expression serious. Maya, I want you to understand something. You're not here because your father asked me to take you. You're here because you and your baby deserve a safe place to build your lives. Don't ever think you owe me anything for that. As Maya settled into bed that night, listening to the last drops of rain on her window, she placed her hand on her belly and whispered to her baby, We're going to be okay, little one. I think we've found someone who actually cares about what happens to us. For the first time in months, Maya fell asleep feeling genuinely hopeful about the future. She had no idea that her biggest challenges were still ahead, but she was beginning to believe that she might actually have the strength and support to face them. Maya woke up to an unusual silence. After living at the cabin for 2 weeks, she had grown accustomed to the sounds of Robert starting his day early, the gentle clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the soft thud of firewood being brought in from the porch, the distant whir of tools from his workshop. But this morning everything was completely quiet. She pulled herself out of bed, her movements now slower and more careful as her due date approached. Looking out her window, she understood. The silence immediately. Snow had fallen during the night, blanketing the entire world in pristine white. The trees looked like they had been decorated with cotton, and the clearing around the cabin sparkled in the early morning sunlight. Maya had seen snow before, but never like this. In town, snow quickly became dirty slush on the roads. Here in the mountains it looked magical, untouched, and peaceful. She watched as a red cardinal landed on a snow-covered branch just outside her window, its bright feathers creating a beautiful contrast against the white backdrop. The sound of the front door opening broke her reverie. She could hear Robert stamping, his feet on the porch, probably shaking snow off his boots. A few minutes later, she smelled coffee brewing and the warm scent of something baking in the oven. When Maya made her way to the kitchen, she found Robert pulling a pan of fresh biscuits from the oven. His cheeks were red from the cold, and snowflakes still clung to his hair and beard. "Good morning," he said with a bright smile. "I hope you slept well. We got about 8 inches of snow overnight." "It's beautiful," Maya said, settling into her usual chair at the table. "I've never seen anything like it." "Wait until you see it in the full daylight," Robert said, bringing her a plate with a warm biscuit and honey. "The whole forest looks like a winter wonderland. Though I have to admit, I'm a little concerned about getting you to your doctor's appointment later this week if we get much more." Maya felt a flutter of worry. "What would happen if we couldn't get down the mountain when the baby comes?" Robert sat down across from her with his own breakfast. "Don't worry about that. I have a 4-wheel drive truck, and I know these roads like the back of my hand. I've been driving them in snow for 20 years. Besides, I have some experience with deliveries if it came to that." "Experience with deliveries?" Maya asked. Robert's expression grew thoughtful. "My wife Clara was pregnant when she died. We were planning to have the baby here at the cabin with a midwife. I spent months learning everything I could about childbirth, reading books, talking to doctors. I wanted to be prepared to help if needed." Maya felt her heart clench with sympathy. "I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," Robert said quietly. "But in a strange way, all that knowledge I gained feels meaningful now, like maybe it was meant to help someone after all." After breakfast, Robert bundled up to clear the snow from their driveway and the path to his workshop. Maya watched from the kitchen window as he worked, noting how methodically and carefully he approached the task. Everything Robert did seemed deliberate and thorough, whether he was cooking, building furniture, or simply shoveling snow. Around midday, Maya heard an unfamiliar sound coming from the workshop. Instead of the usual rhythm of hand tools, she could hear what sounded like a baby crying. Concerned, she put on the warm coat Robert had bought for her and made her way through the snow to investigate. The workshop was warmer than she expected, heated by a wood stove in the corner. Robert was bent over his workbench, carefully sanding what appeared to be a small wooden cradle. The crying sound was coming from a radio in the corner, tuned to what must have been a parenting program. "Sorry about the noise," Robert said, noticing her entrance. "I was listening to a show about infant care while I work." Maya stared at the cradle taking shape under his skilled hands. It was beautiful, made from the same rich wood as all his furniture, with intricate carvings along the sides. "You're making that for my baby?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert paused in his work and looked up at her. "I hope that's okay. I know you might have your own ideas about what you want for the nursery, but I thought every baby should have a proper cradle." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. No one had ever made anything special just for her baby. Her father had made it clear that he considered the pregnancy an embarrassment, and the baby's father had disappeared before she could even tell him if it was a boy or girl. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she said, running her fingers along the smooth wood. But you don't have to do this. You've already done so much. I want to, Robert said simply. Besides, I love making furniture, and it's been a long time since I had a reason to make something for a baby. Over. The following days, Maya found herself spending more and more time in the workshop with Robert. At first, she just sat and watched him work, fascinated by the way he could transform rough pieces of wood into works of art. But gradually, she began helping with small tasks, organizing tools, applying finish to completed pieces, and even learning to sand simple surfaces. You have good hands for this work, Robert observed one afternoon as Maya carefully applied stain to a small jewelry box. Very steady and patient. Maya felt a warm glow of pride. She had never been particularly good at anything creative, always feeling clumsy and awkward compared to other people her age. But here in Robert's workshop she felt capable and useful. I never thought I could do anything like this, she admitted. Most people never try, Robert said. They think furniture making is too difficult or that they don't have the right skills. But really, it's just about taking your time and paying attention to what you're doing. As Maya's due date grew closer, their daily routine became comfortable and natural. Robert would wake early and start breakfast while Maya got ready for the day. They would eat together, discussing plans for the day or sharing stories about their past. Maya would help in the workshop for a few hours while Robert worked on his projects, and then they would break for lunch in the afternoons. Robert often encouraged Maya to rest while he took care of heavier tasks around the cabin. But Maya found she enjoyed the gentle work in the shop, and Robert seemed to appreciate having someone to talk to while he worked. One snowy evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Maya felt the baby moving more actively than usual. Without thinking, she placed both hands on her belly and smiled. "Active tonight?" Robert asked, noticing her expression. "Very active," Maya said. "Sometimes I think this baby is going to be a soccer player. May I?" Robert asked hesitantly, gesturing toward her belly. Maya nodded and Robert gently placed his hand where she indicated. Almost immediately, the baby gave a strong kick right against his palm. Robert's face lit up with wonder and joy. "Hello there, little one," he said softly. "I'm Robert. I'm going to help take care of you and your mama." Maya watched Robert's face as he felt her baby move, seeing the genuine love and excitement there. This man who had started as a complete stranger was already more invested in her child's well-being than the baby's own grandfather or father had ever been. "Robert," Maya said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you really doing all this? I mean, I know what my father told you, but this is so much more than just giving me a place to stay. You're treating us like family." Robert was quiet for a long moment, his hands still resting gently on Maya's belly. "I suppose it's because I know what it feels like to want a family and not have one. After Clara died, this place felt so empty. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone up here. But having you here, knowing that soon there will be a baby's laughter in these rooms, it feels like the cabin is alive again." "But we're not really your family," Maya said though. Saying the words made her heart ache. Robert looked directly into her eyes. "Maya, family isn't just about blood. It's about people who choose to care for each other, who choose to be there through the hard times and the good times. As far as I'm concerned, you and this baby are my family now, if you'll have me." Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in months, they were tears of joy rather than sadness. "I can't think of anything I'd want more," she whispered, that night. As Maya lay in her bed listening to the wind and the pine trees outside her window, she realized that everything in her life had changed. The scared, abandoned girl who had arrived at this cabin 3 weeks ago was gone. In her place was a woman who felt loved, valued, and excited about the future. She placed her hand on her belly and spoke to her baby. "You're going to have the most wonderful life, little one. You're going to grow up in this magical place with a man who already loves you like his own. We're so lucky to be here." For the first time since learning she was pregnant, Maya felt genuinely excited about becoming a mother. She had found not just a safe place to have her baby, but a real home where both she and her child would be treasured and protected. Winter was settling over the mountain, but inside the warm cabin, a new family was being born. Maya woke up to the sound of her baby crying for the first time in her own home. Little Grace had arrived 3 weeks earlier during a fierce snowstorm, and Maya still couldn't believe how perfectly everything had gone. Robert had stayed calm throughout the entire 12 hours of labor, driving them safely to the hospital despite the treacherous roads and remaining by Maya's side until Grace made her entrance into the world. Now, as spring was beginning to melt the winter snow, Maya had settled into the rhythm of motherhood with Robert's gentle support. She had never imagined that caring for a newborn could feel so natural and joyful, but having Robert there to help made all the difference. "Good morning, sunshine," Maya whispered to Grace as she lifted her from the beautiful wooden cradle Robert had finished just days before her birth. The baby looked up at her with bright, alert eyes that reminded Maya of her own mother. The sound of Robert's voice drifted in from the kitchen, and Maya realized he was on the phone with a customer. As she fed Grace and got ready for the day, she could hear him discussing details about a custom dining room set, his voice professional but warm. When Maya entered the kitchen with Grace in her arms, Robert immediately ended his call and came over to greet them both. "How did our girl sleep?" he asked, gently stroking Grace's tiny hand with his finger. Maya's heart did a little flip at his words. "Our girl?" Somewhere over the past few months, Robert had naturally become Grace's father figure, and Maya had to admit that her feelings for him had grown into something much deeper than gratitude. "She was up twice, but went back to sleep easily both times," Maya said, settling into her chair while Robert prepared her breakfast. "Were you talking to the Johnsons about their dining set?" "Yes, and they want to place another order for bedroom furniture," Robert said, his excitement evident. "Business has really picked up since you started helping me with the design work." It was true. Maya had discovered a talent for understanding what customers wanted and helping Robert create pieces that perfectly matched their vision. Her suggestions for color combinations and decorative details had made Robert's furniture even more popular with his clients. "I was thinking," Robert said, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of Maya, "maybe it's time we made this partnership official." Maya looked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Robert sat down across from her, his expression serious but hopeful. "I mean, you've become essential to this business. Your ideas, your attention to detail, your way with customers when they visit the shop. I'd like to make you a full partner." Maya stared at him in surprise. "But I don't know anything about running a business. I've just been helping out." "You know more than you think," Robert said gently. "You have great instincts about what people want, and you're incredibly talented at the finishing work. Plus, Grace is going to need financial security, and this would give you both a real stake in something." Maya felt overwhelmed by his generosity. "Robert, you don't have to do this. You've already given us so much." "I'm not doing it because I have to," Robert said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "I'm doing it because I want to. Because you and Grace have made this place feel like a real home again, and because I can't imagine running this business without you anymore." The warmth in his voice and the gentle pressure of his hand on hers made Maya's pulse quicken. She had been trying to ignore her growing feelings for Robert, telling herself that it was just gratitude and that he was only being kind. But moments like this made it harder to deny that something deeper was developing between them. That afternoon, while Grace napped in her carrier nearby, Maya and Robert worked together in the shop to finish a beautiful rocking chair for a customer. Maya was applying the final coat of finish while Robert fine-tuned the chair's balance and movement. "Perfect," Robert said, giving the chair a gentle push to test its rhythm. "Mrs. Peterson is going to love this for her new grandbaby." Maya watched Robert's face as he examined their work, noting the satisfaction and pride in his expression. Over the months, she had come to love watching him create beautiful things with his hands. There was something deeply attractive about his skill and passion for his craft. "Maya," Robert said suddenly, looking up to find her watching him. "Can I ask you something personal?" Maya felt her cheeks flush, wondering if he had noticed her staring. "Of course. Do you ever think about the future?" I mean, beyond just taking care of Grace and helping with the business? Maya considered the question carefully. I used to be afraid to think about the future. But lately I find myself imagining Grace growing up here, learning to walk in the meadow behind the cabin, helping us in the shop when she's older. Why? Robert set down his tools and moved closer to where Maya was working. Because I think about those things too. And I think about other things as well. What other things? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I think about how much I enjoy our conversations over breakfast. How proud I feel when customers compliment your work. How right it feels to have you and Grace here. Robert paused, seeming to gather his courage. And I think about how much I care about both of you. Maya's heart was racing now. Robert, I know this might be complicated, Robert continued. I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to pressure you into anything. But I also don't want to pretend that what I feel for you is just friendship anymore. Maya looked into Robert's kind, honest face and felt a surge of emotion that took her breath away. I care about you too, she admitted. More than I probably should. Why shouldn't you? Robert asked gently. Because you saved me when I had nowhere else to go. Because you've been so good to Grace and me. I don't want you to think that my feelings are just because I'm grateful. Robert stepped even closer, reaching up to gently touch Maya's cheek. Maya, gratitude doesn't make someone's eyes light up the way yours do when we're working together. Gratitude doesn't make someone hum while they're doing dishes or laugh at my terrible jokes. What you feel for me is real, just like what I feel for you is real. Maya leaned into his touch, finally allowing herself to acknowledge what her heart had been telling her for weeks. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. I love your strength, your kindness, your beautiful smile. I love how you've brought life and joy back to this place. And I love Grace like she's my own daughter. When Robert leaned down to kiss her, Maya felt like everything in her life was finally falling into place. This gentle, caring man had given her not just a home, but a chance to build the kind of life she had never dared to dream about. Grace chose that moment to wake up from her nap, making soft cooing sounds that made both Maya and Robert laugh. I think someone approves, Robert said, picking up the baby and cradling her against his chest. Grace immediately snuggled into him, completely comfortable and content. She loves you, Maya said, watching them together. She's never this calm with strangers. Maybe that's because I'm not a stranger to her, Robert said. Maybe I'm just daddy. Maya felt tears of joy in her eyes. Is that what you want to be? More than anything, Robert said, looking directly at Maya. I want to be Grace's father and your husband if you'll have me. Maya stared at him in shock. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to think about it, Robert said carefully. I know it might seem too soon, but Maya, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to spend every day making you and Grace happy. I want to build a life and a business and maybe even more children together. I want to give Grace my name and make sure she always knows how wanted and loved she is. Maya looked around the workshop where they had spent so many happy hours together, then at Grace sleeping peacefully in Robert's arms, and finally at Robert's face, which showed nothing but love and hope. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. As Robert kissed her again with Grace nestled safely between them, Maya realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unexpected ways. She had come to this mountain as a frightened, abandoned girl, but she was staying as a beloved woman who had found her true home and family. The spring sunshine streaming through the workshop windows felt like a blessing on their new beginning, and Maya knew that the best part of her story was just beginning. Maya was sitting on the front porch with Grace in her arms, enjoying the warm summer afternoon, when she heard the familiar sound of a car engine struggling up the mountain road. She frowned, checking her watch. Robert wasn't expecting any customers today, and they rarely had visitors this far up the mountain. As the car came into view around the bend, Maya's blood ran cold. She recognized the faded red sedan immediately. It was her father's car. Her hands began to shake as she held Grace closer to her chest. 6 months had passed since she left her father's house, and in all that time, he had made no attempt to contact her. Maya had assumed he was happy to have her out of his life permanently, so why was he here now? The car pulled into their clearing and parked next to Robert's truck. Maya watched through the porch railing as her father climbed out of the driver's seat, looking around the property with obvious disapproval. He had always been a small man, but today he seemed even smaller and more bitter than she remembered. "Maya!" he called out, his voice carrying the same commanding tone she remembered from childhood. "Come down here." "We need to talk." Maya stood up slowly, her legs feeling unsteady. Grace sensed her mother's tension and began to fuss. Maya bounced her gently, trying to stay calm. "Hello, Father," she said from the safety of the porch. "What brings you all the way up here?" Her father climbed the front steps, his eyes immediately focusing on Grace with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. "So this is the baby that caused all the trouble," he said coldly. Maya felt a surge of protective anger. "Her name is Grace, and she didn't cause any trouble. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." "Don't be ridiculous," her father snapped. "That baby ruined your life and embarrassed our entire family. But I'm here to fix things." "Fix things?" Maya asked, confused. "I've found you a husband," her father announced, as if he was delivering good news. "Mr. Peterson from the hardware store. His wife died last year, and he needs someone to help him with his 3 children. He's willing to take you and the baby, and he'll even pay me back the money I had to spend getting you settled here." Maya stared at her father in disbelief. Even after everything that had happened, he still saw her as property to be traded away. "I'm not going anywhere," Maya said firmly. "This is my home now," her father's face darkened. "Don't be stupid, Maya. This arrangement with that mountain man was always temporary. You can't stay here forever, playing house and pretending you have a real life." "I do have a real life," Maya protested. "I have a home, a business, and people who care about me." "A business?" Her father laughed harshly. "You mean you're working as his unpaid servant? That's not a business. That's charity." The sound of Robert's truck coming up the driveway interrupted their argument. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her as she saw Robert behind the wheel, returning from his delivery in town. But she also felt nervous about the confrontation that was about to unfold. Robert parked his truck and walked toward the porch, his expression growing serious as he took in the tense scene before him. Maya could see him assessing the situation, his protective instincts clearly kicking in. "Good afternoon," Robert said politely to Maya's father, though his voice was cool. "I'm Robert. I don't believe we've met properly." "We met enough," Maya's father replied rudely. "I'm here to collect my daughter and take her back where she belongs." Robert climbed the porch steps and moved to stand beside Maya, his presence immediately making her feel safer and stronger. Grace reached out her tiny hands toward Robert, and he gently took her from Maya's arms. "Hello, sweetheart," Robert murmured to Grace, his voice soft and loving. "Did you miss me while I was gone?" Maya's father watched this interaction with obvious irritation. "Stop pretending that baby is yours," he said harshly. "Maya, get your things. We're leaving now." "No," Maya said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "I'm not going anywhere." "You don't have a choice," her father said, his voice rising. "You're still my daughter, and you'll do as I say." "Actually, she does have a choice," Robert said calmly, shifting Grace to one arm while placing his other hand protectively on Maya's shoulder. "Maya is an adult, and she's free to make her own decisions about where she lives and how she raises her child." Her father's face turned red with anger. "You have no right to interfere in family business. This girl belongs to me until she's properly married." "Maya doesn't belong to anyone," Robert said, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel. "She's not property to be traded or sold." "I paid you good money to take her off my hands," her father shouted. "That was supposed to be temporary, just until I could find her a real husband." Maya felt sick as the truth of her father's plan became clear. He had never intended for her to find happiness or build a real life. He had simply been looking for someone to warehouse her until he could make another arrangement. "You paid me," Nothing, Robert said firmly. I refused your money, remember? And even if you had paid me, that wouldn't give you any ownership rights over another human being. Maya's father pulled a folded paper from his pocket and waved it at Robert. I have a legal document here that says otherwise. This contract states that you agreed to house and care for my daughter temporarily in exchange for compensation. Robert barely glanced at the paper. That document isn't worth the paper it's written on. Maya came here of her own free will, and she stays here of her own free will. She's coming with me, her father insisted. Reaching for Maya's arm, Maya jerked away from his touch, feeling years of suppressed anger finally boiling over. Don't touch me, she said fiercely. And don't you dare talk about Grace like she's a mistake. She's beautiful and perfect, and she's going to grow up knowing she's loved and wanted. Loved and wanted? Her father scoffed. By who? This stranger who took pity on you. You think this is love, Maya? You think he actually cares about you? Yes, I do, Maya said, looking directly at Robert. Because he's shown me more love and respect in 6 months than you showed me in 19 years? Her father's expression turned ugly. You're living in a fantasy, Maya. Men like him don't marry girls like you. He's just using you for convenience, and when he gets tired of playing house, you'll be left with nothing. That's enough, Robert said, his voice cutting through her father's cruel words. You need to leave, now. I'm not leaving without my daughter, her father said stubbornly. Then you're going to have a very long wait, Robert replied. Because Maya isn't going anywhere she doesn't want to go. Maya's father looked back and forth between them, clearly frustrated that his plan wasn't working. Fine, he said finally. But when this little game of yours falls apart, don't come crying to me. You made your choice, Maya. You chose this stranger over your own family. You're right, Maya said, her voice steady and clear. I did make my choice. I chose people who actually love me over someone who sees me as a burden and an embarrassment. Her father's face went white with rage. You ungrateful little— That's enough, Robert interrupted, stepping forward. You need to leave my property. Immediately, or I'll call the sheriff and have you removed. For a moment, Maya's father looked like he might try to physically force her to come with him. But Robert's calm confidence and obvious physical strength seemed to make him think better of it. This isn't over, her father said, pointing his finger at Maya. When you come crawling back, and you will remember that you brought it on yourself? As her father stomped back to his car and drove away in a cloud of dust and anger, Maya felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she had stood up to him and chosen her own path. Robert handed Grace back to Maya and pulled them both into a gentle embrace. Are you okay? He asked softly. Maya looked around at the peaceful mountain clearing, at the cabin that had become her home, at the man who had become her family, and at the beautiful baby in her arms. I'm more than okay, she said with certainty. I'm exactly where I belong. As they stood together on the porch, watching her father's car disappear down the mountain road, Maya realized that she had finally closed the door on her painful past and chosen the beautiful future that awaited her. She had found her real family, and nothing would ever make her give that up. 2 years later, Maya stood at the kitchen window watching Grace chase butterflies in the wildflower meadow behind their cabin. At 3 years old, Grace was a bundle of energy and curiosity, with her mother's gentle spirit and what everyone said was Robert's practical nature. Her laughter echoed across the clearing as she tried to catch the colorful wings that danced just out of her reach. Mama, look! Grace called out, pointing excitedly at a particularly large monarch butterfly. Pretty! Maya smiled and waved back, her hand unconsciously resting on her growing belly. At 5 months pregnant, she was just beginning to show, and this time everything felt completely different. This pregnancy was planned, celebrated, and surrounded by love from the very beginning. The sound of Robert's voice carried from the workshop, where he was meeting with their newest employee, Jake, a young man from town who had shown real talent for woodworking. Their furniture business had grown so much over the past 2 years that they could barely keep up with orders. Maya's designs had become particularly popular with customers who drove up from the city looking for unique, handcrafted pieces. Maya walked over to the small desk in the corner of the kitchen where she handled the business side of their operation. Orders were scheduled out for the next 6 months, and their bank account showed numbers that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. More importantly, they had been able to hire 3 local people, bringing steady income to families. In the valley below, the phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Maya answered with their business greeting. "Mountain View Custom Furniture, this is Maya." "Maya," came an excited voice on the other end. "This is Patricia Williams from the magazine feature we discussed. I have the most wonderful news." Maya's heart skipped a beat. 3 months ago, a reporter from a national home and lifestyle magazine had visited their workshop to do a story about small mountain businesses. Maya had been nervous about the attention, but Robert had convinced her that sharing their story might help other small craftspeople. "The article is going to run in next month's issue," Patricia continued, "and the response from our advance readers has been incredible. We've never had so many people asking for contact information for a featured business." Maya felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. "That's amazing news. Thank you so much for the opportunity." "There's more," Patricia said. "We'd like to do a follow-up piece about work-life balance for rural entrepreneurs. Would you and Robert be interested? We're particularly intrigued by how you've built a successful business while raising a young family in such a remote location." After Maya hung up the phone, she sat quietly for a moment, thinking about how much had changed since that terrifying day when her father had dropped her off in Robert's truck. The scared, pregnant teenager who had arrived at this cabin seemed like a different person entirely. Robert came in from the workshop, his hair dusted with sawdust and his face glowing with satisfaction from a productive day. He immediately went to the window to check on Grace, who was now sitting in the grass making a bouquet of dandelions. "How's our little explorer doing?" he asked, wrapping his arms around Maya from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "She's perfect," Maya said, leaning back against his chest. "And we just got some interesting news." She told him about the magazine call, and Robert listened with growing amazement. "A follow-up article?" he said. "Maya, do you realize what this could mean for the business?" "I know it's exciting," Maya said, "but part of me worries about too much attention. We're so happy with our quiet life here." Robert turned her around to face him, his expression gentle but confident. "We'll handle whatever comes. We've built something strong here, Maya, our family, our business, our life together. A little publicity isn't going to change what really matters." That evening, as they sat on the front porch after dinner, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Grace was curled up in Robert's lap, listening to him read from her favorite book about forest animals. The setting sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple, and the air was filled with the peaceful sounds of evening birds and rustling leaves. "Robert," Maya said softly, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if my father hadn't brought me here that day?" Robert looked up from the book, considering her question seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember that we found each other exactly when we both needed it most. You needed a safe place to build a new life, and I needed a reason to believe in family again. I used to think I was so unlucky," Maya said. "Pregnant and abandoned, rejected by my own father. But now I realize that everything that seemed so terrible was actually leading me here, to you and to this life." Grace had fallen asleep in Robert's arms, her small fist clutching his shirt. He stood carefully and carried her inside to her bedroom, the same room where Maya had spent her first nervous nights at the cabin. Now it was decorated with Grace's artwork, her favorite toys, and photographs of their little family's adventures. When Robert returned to the porch, he found Maya standing at the railing, looking out at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her at the railing. "I was thinking about Grace," Maya said, "about how she grew up here with both her parents, feeling loved and wanted every single day, about how she never have to wonder if she's valued or if she belongs somewhere. And our new little one too, Robert added, placing his hand on Maya's belly. This baby will be born into so much love. Maya covered his hand with hers, feeling the gentle flutter of movement inside her. Do you think Grace is excited about becoming a big sister? Robert chuckled. Are you kidding? She's been talking to your belly every day, telling the baby about all the things they're going to do together. Yesterday I caught her trying to teach the baby how to stack blocks by demonstrating on your stomach. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the mountain and feeling grateful for the peace they had found. Their early days together seemed like a lifetime ago, when Maya had been afraid to hope for anything. Good and Robert had resigned himself to spending his life alone. Maya, Robert said eventually, I need to tell you something. She looked at him with curiosity, noting the serious tone in his voice. Your father called the house phone this afternoon, while you were napping. Maya felt her stomach clench with anxiety. What did he want? He said he'd heard about our success through someone in town. He wanted to know if we might be interested in some kind of business partnership. Robert's expression was carefully neutral. He also asked about Grace. Maya felt a surge of protective anger. What did you tell him? I told him that our family and our business were not open for discussion with him. I told him not to call again. Maya felt a wave of gratitude for Robert's protection, but also a strange sense of sadness. Sometimes I wonder if he's changed at all, if he ever regrets how he treated me. Maybe he has, Robert said gently. People sometimes realize their mistakes too late, but, Maya, you don't owe him anything. You've built a beautiful life despite what he put you through, not because of it. I know, Maya said, and I wouldn't change anything about how our story turned out. As they prepared for bed that night, Maya took a long look around their bedroom. The handmade furniture, the family photos on the dresser, the small bassinet that Robert had crafted for their new baby, everything told the story of a life built with love, patience, and hope. 3 years ago, Maya had been a frightened girl with no options and no future. Tonight she was a confident woman, a loving mother, a successful business partner, and a cherished wife. She had a home that truly felt like a sanctuary, work that fulfilled her, and a family that would never make her question her worth. Grace's sleepy voice called out from her room, and Maya went to check on her. Mama, Grace whispered, tell baby that I love them. Maya placed Grace's small hand on her belly. You can tell them yourself, sweetheart. Hi, baby, Grace whispered to Maya's stomach. I'm your big sister, Grace. I can't wait to meet you and show you all the best places to find pretty rocks. As Maya tucked Grace back into bed and returned to her own room, she realized that this was what true happiness felt like. Not the dramatic, overwhelming emotion she had once imagined, but a deep, steady sense of contentment and belonging. The mountain that had once seemed like a prison had become her sanctuary. The stranger she had feared had become her greatest love, and the future that had once seemed so frightening was now filled with endless possibilities. Maya fell asleep that night with Robert's arm around her, and their new baby moving gently inside her, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of the beautiful, ordinary life they had built together from the ashes of her former sorrows.